Don't ask me what you know is true. Don't have to tell you I love your precious heart. I was standing, you were there. Two worlds collided, and they could never tear us apart. We can live for 1,000 years.
This is Dan Dicks here reporting for Press for Truth. The video that you just watched was an ad that aired during the Super Bowl yesterday that has a lot of people scratching their heads. Many are asking, what's the goal of this Super Bowl propaganda commercial? So I decided to chime in with an answer. It's to normalize sin. If you're killing babies and or are LGBTQ, it's all good to God. That's the message, which of course is unbiblical. It almost seemed like the people who paid for this ad just simply asked AI to come up with some images that would be ultra woke and super insulting to real Christians out there. And no, I'm not talking about the Joel Osteens of the world, who, by the way, just had his megachurch shot up by a transgender person. Footage shows the moment that the man identifying as a woman opened fire on the unsuspecting congregation. And as we see here, breaking, Joel Osteen church shooter, identified as Genesee Marino, also went by Jeffrey. And trans pro-Palestinian gunman Genesee Marino, 36, shot dead in Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church in Texas, had Free Palestine scrawled on his AR-15. And this is becoming more and more commonplace. Remember the transgender shooter in Nashville who shot up her former Christian school and who even wrote a detailed manifesto? We later discovered the leaked manifesto proves trans Nashville shooter was brainwashed leftist who hated white privilege. It turns out Audrey Hale was a highly brainwashed leftist who was taught to hate capitalism and the white race. But this Christian hate doesn't stop there. Remember all the church burnings in Canada? Well, we just had another one.
Okay, hell, come on. Blood. Sure, it's good catch. Come on. Where is it? Oh shit.
One of the main reasons why churches are being burned in Canada is because of the lie from the Canadian government that there was a genocide at residential schools resulting in so-called mass graves. To this day, not a single body has been excavated. It's all a huge hoax. But unfortunately, the damage has already been done. I went out on the streets of Vancouver to interview random people about these church burnings, and to my utter shock and horror, I was very surprised to see that nearly 100% of the people I spoke with were in favor of church burnings. Check this out. Have you heard a lot of the people are turning their anger on the church right now? 6 churches to date have been burned down on Indigenous land, burnt to the ground. What are your thoughts on that? People who are currently burning down Catholic churches today in response to what happened.
I understand their rage. I share that outrage. Yeah, I think they should disband the Catholic Church and give that money to anybody that they murdered and raped over the years.
What about the burning of the buildings, though? Do you condone that?
It's just symbolism.
So you're okay with the burning of the building?
They don't even use them.
I don't know. It's hard. I don't think there's any right answer.
To whether or not if it's wrong to burn down a church today?
I mean, I don't know if I can't speak to how someone else feels.
Obviously, when you have a church that has stolen children and buried them in unmarked graves, there's bound to be a reaction to that.
Anger at a building
Yeah.
in response to the death of children. So I think that's justified.
That's justified?
I believe so.
Because they're pissed. Dude, 50,000 kids, this is a genocide country. We're built on fucking dead people.
Do you condone burning churches?
I could give a crap.
6 churches have just been burnt to the ground. Have you heard about that? Catholic, you condone or support burning churches?
Absolutely.
In today's society, this
every
is
single one of them down.
I don't think anyone was hurt in the burning down of churches. I think they're burning down a symbol that has oppressed them for years.
Right.
So I mean, I don't think the destruction of property is usually warranted, but I understand that there's anger that people are feeling and they're trying to express themselves.
Bunch of pedos. Everybody knows they're fucking pedos. Catholics are pedos.
They put indigenous people in residential schools, man, and tortured them.
Yeah, the Catholic Church, along with the government.
You tell me whether that's right or not, man.
That's very, very wrong. But I don't think burning down churches today is going to help anything.
Burning down churches long time ago was a good move.
So you think all of them should be continued to be burned down?
no, not at all.
I'll go burn that one down right there.
So in case you guys couldn't tell, the whole world is in a major case of hostility towards God. This is precisely why the name of Jesus Christ is the only name that's used as a cuss word. Nobody does that with Buddha or Muhammad. Heck, people don't even do that with Hitler's name. I mean, could you imagine using your own mom's name as a cuss word? Let's say you hit your thumb with a hammer, you want to shout out an expletive to express your feelings, and you use the name of your mom? You wouldn't do that because it's disrespectful. And most people respect their moms, so they wouldn't do that. But they clearly don't respect God because they use his name as a cuss word. That's called blasphemy. And in case you guys didn't know, Jesus explained exactly why the world hates him. Jesus literally said, "The world hates me because I testify that its deeds are evil." People don't like authority figures telling them not to do things, especially those things that even they, deep down inside, know are bad. Because we've all been given a God-given conscience. His moral law is written on our hearts. We know it's wrong to lie, to steal, to commit adultery, to engage in blasphemy. But it's because of our love of sin that many people have turned their backs on God. And that's precisely why the world is in the state that it is in today. So today, I wanted to leave you with what I think is the best speech I've ever given in my life, where in front of a room full of libertarians and atheists, I told them that without Jesus Christ in the picture, they're never going to defeat the New World Order. This was back in 2018 in Acapulco, Mexico at the annual Anarchapulco conference. I titled my speech, "The Truth About the Endgame." Give it a watch, and when you're done, let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you appreciate my efforts to bring you this information, please check that top link in the description below to where you can financially support me at pressfortruth.ca/donate. Thank you so much to everyone who takes some time today to support my efforts here to Press for Truth. So without further ado, here's my speech about God and the New World Order, titled, "The Truth About the Endgame." Hello everybody, welcome back from the break. For anybody who might not be familiar with who I am, my name is Dan Dicks and I run an independent media group based out of Vancouver called Press for Truth. And this is actually my 4th Anarchapulco experience. I've been coming to this since the very beginning. And during that time, my understandings of the philosophies of anarchism have evolved in those 4 years, but so too has the state, the system, recognized this awakening that is happening, and they are now scrambling to form a blueprint for the New World Order, a communistic blueprint. And From what I can tell, it seems like Canada is being used as the experimental grounds for this, for building this New World Order. So today I'm going to provide a few examples of how Canada is being used to build this New World Order and their vision of a secularist, communistic New World Order utopia. So if we're going to talk about the state of Canada, we need to start with the head, and that is Justin Trudeau. He's very, very different from Donald Trump in many ways. He's similar in the sense that he's really more of a celebrity than a politician. But where they differ is in being politically correct. They are polar opposites. Justin Trudeau identifies as a feminist. He's actually the largest promoter of the LGBT, LMNOQP community and the gender rights advocacy groups. And you may recall, I don't know if you heard, just a few weeks ago, the Canadian government changed the lyrics of the national anthem, and they removed the part where it says, "In all our sons command," to "in all of us command," to be more gender inclusive. So that's what we're dealing with up there. I don't know if you heard him a few days ago. Somebody at a town hall made the comment that we need to do things for mankind, and he said, "Oh, excuse me, ma'am, you should use the term people-kind in order to be more gender inclusive." So that's what we're dealing with there. And they've even gone to the extent of introducing a bill called Bill C-16, which would criminalize, make it illegal for you to misuse somebody's preferred gender pronoun. So if a man wants to identify as a woman, and you refer to him as a he instead of a her, well, under Bill C-16, you could be charged with a hate crime. And if that wasn't bad enough, in Ontario, the largest province in Canada, under Kathleen Wynne, who happens to be a lesbian, she promotes Bill 89, which would give child protection services the ability to take your child away from you if you refuse to recognize the preferred gender of your own child. And speaking of children, Justin Trudeau is actually one of the, as a feminist, he professes to be a Christian, yet he is the biggest promoter of abortion as being a woman's right to do what she will with her body, but that's in direct contrast to his own faith. So you must be asking, what in the world is going on there in Canada? It almost seems like social justice warrior ideologies have infiltrated the political system, and their ideas are starting to permeate throughout society there. And it's this next generation with their trigger warnings and safe spaces who are going to be the police and the lawyers and the judges. So what kind of a world are they going to be bringing to the West? Well, I'm already seeing a leftist alliance with Islam happening in Canada. You can't be critical of Islam right now in Canada. Under Motion 103, they have something now referred to as Islamophobia. And I've said this a lot of times, Islamophobia is really a nonsensical term because it implies an irrational fear of something. But there's really nothing irrational about rejecting a culture and a religion that's at odds with our Western Christian standards and values here. So, if you're critical of Sharia law, hate crime. If you are critical of Justin Trudeau's immigration policies and his new integration program to integrate ISIS fighters back into Canadian society, well, you're Islamophobic. And if you're anything like me and you produce video content that points out just how ridiculous all this is and how much nonsense it is, well, you are branded as a white supremacist, a racist, or maybe even a fascist. It was not long ago I went to a rally in Vancouver. It was actually a protest where about 12 or 13 guys were planning on showing up in solidarity with the protesters in the United States who were trying to protect the American Confederate statues. You may remember that whole debate. Wouldn't you know it, about 4,000 counter-protesters showed up to this rally to try to drown out these guys' messages of hate. And they managed to do it in a good way because these guys didn't show up, and it turned into a huge leftist alliance with Islam type of rally. And at one point I got there, and there was a native lady on the stage giving a speech, and she started to talk about how it was the white man who destroyed her people. And she literally said, quote, "The white man raped my entire family and is solely responsible for the destruction of my people." And I made the comment, and I just said, I thought this was an anti-racist rally. And all of a sudden, a friend of mine reiterated my statements, echoed what I said. All of a sudden, we were surrounded. They all started pointing their fingers and saying, Nazis go home, racists go home, because we dared to point out the hypocrisy in their ideology on the left. But it's not just the left. I think this is a false left-right paradigm that we have to be aware of here, because democracy is really just an insidious form of communism. And that's not going to change. And democratic states run counter to human nature. So we got to ask, how are we going to move forward here, changing the world to make it a better place? And I think it's really important to understand the past when trying to figure out what's going on in the present. So I want to read to you a quote that I found from the famed author, historian, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was a survivor of communism. And this is what he had to say. As a survivor of the communist Holocaust, I'm horrified to witness how my beloved America, my adopted country, is gradually being transformed into a secularist and atheistic utopia, where communist ideals are glorified and promoted, while Judeo-Christian values and morality are ridiculed and increasingly eradicated from public and social consciousness of our nation. Under the decades-long assault and militant radicalism of many so-called liberal and progressive elites, God has been progressively erased from our public and educational institutions, to be replaced with all manner of delusion, perversion, corruption, violence, decadence, and insanity. It's no coincidence that as Marxist ideologies and secularist principles engulf the culture and pervert mainstream thinking, individual freedoms and liberties are rapidly disappearing. As a consequence, Americans feel increasingly more powerless and subjugated by some of the most radical and hypocritical, least democratic, and characterless individuals our society has ever produced. Those of us who have experienced and witnessed firsthand the atrocities and the terror of communism understand fully well why such evil takes root and how it grows and deceives, and the kind of hell it will ultimately unleash on the innocent and the faithful. Godlessness is always the first step towards tyranny and oppression. More than half a century ago, while I was still a child, I recall hearing a number of older people offer the following explanation for the great disasters that had befallen Russia. Men have forgotten God. That's why all this has happened. Since then, I've spent well nigh 50 years working on the history of our revolution, and in the process, I've read hundreds of books, collected hundreds of personal testimonies, and have already contributed 8 volumes of my own towards the effort of clearing away the rubble left by that upheaval. But if I were to ask today to formulate as consciously as possible the main cause of the ruinous revolution that swallowed up some 60 million of our people, I could not put it more accurately than to repeat, men have forgotten God. That's why all this has happened. And I read that to you today, not to preach in any means, but I merely want to point out the fact that governments have conditioned us into a philosophical, materialist society that is devoid of any kind of religious truth. It doesn't even enter the debate, even though it's as real and serious as science and history itself. So I think we really need to consider who is it that inspires us when we want to change the world. Because whether we like this or not, everybody here has an archetypal type of hero to which you look up to. And you may emulate that person in behavior, probably on a subconscious level. For a lot of people in this room, it could be somebody like a Murray Rothbard, or a Ludwig von Mises, or Ron Paul, or Jeff Berwick, and that's great. For guys like Trudeau and Trump, it's probably like Hitler or Lucifer or something like that, I don't know. But for some people, and maybe even some of the people in this room, despite the ridicule they may get, when you emulate behavior, some people may follow the teachings of Christ. And if you happen to find yourself in that camp, I would say congratulations, because that means you're being truthful to yourself, your friends, your family, and your community. And I said it's not my intention to preach here today, obviously, but I am going to bring up the big bad B word, and amongst some anyways, and no, I'm not talking about Bilderberg, I am talking about the Bible, but I wanted to present something to you that presented itself to me when I opened myself up to it. Just in doing research for this talk, I came across that Alexander Solzhenitsyn quote, and he's talking about the revolution, communism, how it plays in with God. And I literally just cracked open the Bible, I looked down, I started reading, and this is what it said. Avoid foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they generate strife. And a servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be gentle to all, able to teach, patient, in humility, correcting those who are in opposition to God. Perhaps will grant them repentance, so that they may know the truth, and they may come to their senses and escape the snares of the devil, having been taken captive by him to do his will. But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. And from such people turn away. For it is this sort who creep into households and make captives of gullible women loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts, always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. And that's where I see society today, really. Always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of that truth. And what is this truth? Why do we need to press for truth, as it were? Well, I feel now it is my mission to inform you that unless the West rediscovers Christ, who he was, what he came here to do, and the fact that he's the very foundation of our civilization, especially in the midst of this Islamification of the West, well, unless we rediscover that tradition, I think the freedom movement and the liberty movement is going to be prevented from truly reaching the liberty that it needs to, because without Christ you're missing the full spectrum of that archetypal hero equation when it comes to how to conduct oneself properly. Because it's not all about just abolishing the state, which I am all for, but it is actually about changing yourself, being the change you wish to see in the world, as it were. And I think that doesn't necessarily happen up here, but I think it has to happen in here. So that's the challenge today. I would like for you guys to, I'm going to challenge you that when you leave this room, you analyze yourself. Who is it in your life who maybe you have as an archetypal hero, maybe on a subconscious level, somebody you look up to and you emulate in behavior, and try to assess, is that something that's positive and good? Is it encouraging to me, my friends, my family, and my community? When I first met Jeff Berwick, it was in 2014 at a Bitcoin conference in Toronto, and I spent a considerable amount of time with him, and I told him everything that I believed in, and he said, Dan, you know what, man? You, my friend, are an anarchist, and you don't even know it yet. And I said, you know what, Jeff, I think you're right, because I was under the impression that as an anarchist, as a Christian, you can't be an anarchist, because the whole no ruler thing. And for the Christian, they obviously have a ruler. And Jeff said, but that's where you are mistaken, my friend. Nobody has violated the non-aggression principle in that mutual contract. This is a mutually agreed upon contract with one-on-one personal relationship. Therefore, you can reconnect with your Creator and have a personal relationship as a principled anarchist. And I said, that's great, I'm sold. And so I've been on it ever since. So that's the challenge, folks. I would just say, look into yourself and make sure, question that archetypal hero to which you look up to. And hopefully, if we do that, we can start building this place towards something that's not going to represent Canada and the example that they are now trying to set for the world, but we can actually start to slow that process down and maybe even stop it one day. So I certainly intend to continue to press for truth, as it were, and I hope you guys will join me. Thank you.